Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. I'll give everyone a few minutes to hop on before we start. I know Fridays, they kind of feel sluggish, but Fridays also you kind of feel excited because it's Friday. And so you have a little more pep in your step. So once you are live, if you would do me a huge favor and just in the comments, if you would drop your first name and maybe the country or state where you're watching from, I'd love to just have some names in mind while I'm chit chatting, or else I just feel like I'm talking to myself, and that's not near as fun. Also, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please click the subscribe button so you get all the notifications on when we go live. I see that more people are hopping on, so we'll give it just about another 30 seconds or a minute. Hi, Teresa from Alabama. So my husband and I just moved from Colorado to Tennessee. We bought a house in Tennessee last weekend, actually. But right now, I'm at my parents' home in LaGrange, Georgia. So I don't LaGrange, Georgia is where I'm from. So I live 30 minutes from the Alabama state line. So many a days spent in Auburn and shopping. Hi, Eugene from California. I want to go to California so bad. My husband's a pilot, and so I'm hoping one day I can sneak a ride with him. Roll Tide. There you go. Very nice. I'm from Georgia, and I can't make myself a Dogs fan. I was named after Peyton Manning when he was the quarterback for Tennessee. So I feel a natural need to cheer for the Vols, so I expect nothing out of them. Bless their souls. A for effort, F for execution in the football world. But anyway, it's been another minute or two, so we're going to get started. I'm not sure how many of you have had the chance to actually get the book Forgiving What You Can't Forget by Lysa Terkeurst. It is on Amazon. If you have Prime, it comes fairly quickly. But I've had a blast reading this. I have never read a Lysa Terkeurst book. I've heard wonderful things about her. I follow her on social media, but this is my first go at actually reading one of her books. And I'm not going to lie, it's very good. I'm a Christian writer, Christian author myself. And I'll be honest, I am so skeptical of reading Christian literature that's not the Bible because it's flawed people writing their perceptions of a flawless God. And so you always wonder how much of this is God inspired and how much of this is them. And I am a writer myself in the Christian niche, and I feel a lot of conviction. I overthink what I write. Is this of Peyton or is this of God? And can those two things merge? But I'm not going to lie. With Lysa Terkeurst, I feel like she has found that beautiful space of being very vulnerable in her experiences, letting this be Lysa's voice, but also totally giving you God's truth. Like, the truth is hard to swallow. I think I read a quote the other day from somebody, and they said, if your faith in Jesus is always easy, I question your faith. And, I sat there and thought about that for a minute, and I was like, you know what? That is so true. I think faith is this concept that we love to tattoo on our wrist or monogram on a purse or a t-shirt. And we believe in Jesus and we assume that's our faith. But I think the more you dig into the Christian faith and you find things like forgiveness and how hard it is, the more you have to actually wrestle with your faith, because your faith and your sin nature are not buddies. Like, they are going to fight. That is why there's so much when Paul's writing to the early church, there's so much about spiritual warfare and there's so much about the armor of God. It's because if you have a true faith in Jesus and you are pursuing him, you're going to have stuff that comes up where your faith doesn't feel pretty. You're not in the mood to sniff the flowers and throw confetti everywhere. Your faith's going to take work and it's going to be hard. And I think that's what this book is I think Lysa is letting us see that faith is hard, but that's not a bad thing, because once faith is hard and you are willing to, as my father says, put the pedal to the metal, you are willing to commit to faith being this raw, gritty journey, that is the second God can refine you and work on you. Like, that is the point in which you are malleable and God can literally make you the clay and he can be the potter and mold you into something beautiful. Lisa just hopped on from New York. Hello. I'm obsessed with upstate New York. I've only been to the city a few times, but I want to come to upstate New York so bad. But I'm glad you're here with us. So, chapter 3 of this book, I can't get over the main theme of the book in and of itself. So, every now and then I have to remind myself that you have to stop going on tangents about the book as a whole, because this is a book club where we actually talk about the chapters. So, chapter 3, give me a second, is this even survivable? So, the chapter is a question. And I kind of love when Christians are willing to have questions, because I think, number one, it's humbling. It's you admitting, whether you even know you're admitting it or not, asking a question is you admitting you don't know the answer. And the reality is, when you're willing to ask the question in light of truth, in light of the Bible, if you're willing to pray to God with a question, it's not only humility, but it's this subtle surrender to his will. You're saying, I don't know the answer, but I also trust in your character enough that I trust your answer. Like, I will wait on your answer. It might not even be what I want it to be, but your answer is what I can bank on, is truth, and the truth that will transform my soul and maybe even transform those around me. So I like her vulnerability, and just stating a question is that, the beginning of the chapter, is this even a survivable thing? This art of forgiving when it seems impossible. Again, if you're not sure of Lysa Terkeurst's background, at least when she was writing this book that was published in 2020, she just found out that her husband was cheating on her, so there was some infidelity. He also struggles with substance abuse issues. So I think all of this essentially was just coming to the light. And, when she first started writing this book. And again, I think that's what makes this book so powerful, is she's willing to ask questions in the middle of hard times. And she's also willing to not even write this book after she's fully forgiven and fully healed, if that's even a thing on this side of heaven. She's willing to show you the questions she's asking and the hurt she's feeling while she's going through this season. And I think that makes for not only a vulnerable writer, but a relatable believer. If we're not vulnerable with people and what we're struggling with, and I'm not saying you have to air out all your dirty laundry, or by no means, please don't post your whole life story on Facebook. But the second you're willing to say, hey, this is the season I'm in, and it doesn't feel good, and I believe God's here, but I don't know what he's doing. I don't get why he's doing what he's doing. You become a relatable believer. Other believers can breathe that sigh of relief and go, oh my goodness, I'm not the only one who's been struggling with that, or feeling this way, or having all these questions. But also, people who aren't believers, they see you as a human being. And in a way, they instantly relate to the fact that you don't have all the answers, just like they don't have all the answers to life. And you become, I don't want to say the kind of believer, but you become a believer they would actually go out and get coffee with, because you're willing to talk life and what it really is, and the raw, nitty gritty messiness. You're not going to preach at anybody in your hard season. You're not just quoting scripture to patch up the reality that you're actually not okay. You're just being an honest human being, and both believers and non-believers can relate to that. So chapter 3, it starts on page 26. She starts the chapter with a quote that she actually wrote in her journal when she was going through this period of grieving and trying to figure out forgiveness. It says, "Forgiveness is a complicated grace that uncomplicates my blinding pain and helps me see beautiful again." She starts the chapter saying, I had this beautiful this beautiful insight, this beautiful inspiration into how forgiveness is actually going to uncomplicate everything, though forgiveness in the middle of heartache feels complicated. And she's saying in the start of the chapter, like, I had this revelation. I thought I was doing great. And then she said something triggered her. And all of a sudden, this beautiful notion, this beautiful revelation was almost something, I don't know if it was something she didn't fully believe anymore. I think it's something she didn't want to believe. Does that make sense? Like, you know the truth a lot of times, but you don't want to have to live it out because it's tough. And I think that's what's happened here. It just took one simple trigger. Personally, I wish she delved into it a smidge more, but perhaps it's something very personal, something, I don't know. Triggers can be a lot of intense things. So I respect her privacy as a writer, but it was just something she said simple. And all of a sudden, she feels like forgiveness is too complicated to uncomplicate her situation. And at the top of 27, she starts asking another question. She says, but how in the world does it uncomplicate my blinding pain so I can see beautiful again? Sometimes words sound so possible until the living of them feels impossible. I read that and I was like, oh, that's a good point. I think that's one of the reasons that I don't want to say Jesus wasn't a fan of, because I don't fully know Jesus, hence me pursuing him. But I think that's why he might have not been a fan of the Pharisees and the Sadducees when he was on earth, because they're over here talking a big old talk. And the reality is, if they were actually walking their talk, I think there would have been a certain level of humility where they wouldn't have been blowing trumpets about what the law was, because in theory, the moment you speak something, the moment you have to live it, or else you're a hypocrite. And I think that's what Jesus was just able to call them out on. He said, "No, you're all hypocrites." He literally calls him a brood of vipers. And you are spewing all of the law, which in theory is meant to refine. I mean, after all, Jesus says, I didn't come to get rid of the law. I came to fulfill it. So Jesus isn't hating on the law by any means. It was the way people received God before Christ came. But his point was, if you were actually living out the law and it was refining you in the way it was meant to refine you, you wouldn't be walking around telling everyone else how to live it. You would actually be humbly, quietly wrestling with yourself, figuring out how to walk your talk every day. So Lysa goes on to say, I wrote it talking about that quote in the beginning about how forgiveness was actually going to uncomplicate things. I wrote that because I had truly experienced it. So why was I having such a hard time living it in this moment? A maddening heaviness returned. And so she says, it's kind of like she took one step forward and two steps backwards. And she's in the middle of this hurt and this pain. And she said in that moment when she was triggered and she just felt like she had lost ground, she said she had the urge to hit something, to slam something, and she said the door made perfect sense to her. So she just starts opening and slamming her front door over and over, opening and slamming. And bless her heart, as we ladies say here in the South, bless her heart, the delivery girl was at her door and she did not know it. And she's sitting here slamming her door, just yelling. I don't even know that she was yelling words as much as just screaming to get all of that pinned up hurt out of her body. And that's what happened. That's how she released her stress and her hurt. And apparently, she had an audience of one delivery girl that she did not know about. And she said in the middle of all of that messy tirade on the front porch, everyone who was near her, just like the delivery girl, ended up catching the brunt of her chaos, like what she was feeling on the inside, because she was triggered and just didn't want to adopt that concept that forgiveness was refining her for a good reason. And forgiveness would get this just pinned up, burning frustration out of her soul in time. She ends up letting everyone else feel the chaos that she feels on the inside. It goes back to that whole idea that hurt people hurt people. And if you're not in a place where you can see your hurt as an opportunity to grow, which nobody wants to do that. I'm not saying you're going to be eagerly waiting for the day something bad happens so you can just be so excited about forgiving. But if you're not willing to at least address the grace and refinement in a hard season, a lot of times bitterness sets up. And when bitterness sets up, it is incredibly easy for everyone else to take the brunt of what you're going through. And so, I don't know what all happened as far as, I mean, I know the divorce, but it seems like a lot of people, either other like friends were somehow involved or knew about it. Because she starts journaling more. So on page 28, she gives you more insight into that same journal. And she starts writing about how she don't want to forgive any of these people. It feels impossible to get over. She says she's read the Bible verses. She knows God's instructions. She said over and over, I forgive, I forgive, I forgive, I forgive. But she's not feeling it. She says, forgiveness didn't seem to work for me. So please don't ask me to forgive like Jesus forgives. I'll be honest, if that's totally normal. I think for a long time, you know, I thought that I grew up in a very legalistic church. Very legalistic church. It was a very unhealthy church, and I didn't realize that for years because I was little. Um, but for years, I thought I had to come to Jesus with very pretty words, and I knew I was called to a pure heart, and so in my head, I thought I couldn't really pray to him or bring him any situation until I had a very pretty hold on it. I had pretty words to pray, pretty words to show him, pretty feelings to prove that I was doing everything right, like he said. And it's not how a relationship works. Number one, Jesus is very well aware that you are a flawed human and that I'm a flawed human. And so he doesn't expect perfection in anything, even in our conversations with him. And I think that's what we see with Lysa here. Like part of her healing is just addressing that forgiveness isn't easy, because I think the moment, maybe not even just her, but all of us, the moment we address that forgiveness isn't easy is the moment we actually have the grace to try to forgive. Like, I'm trying to think. Did you ever in school, high school, college, whatever, you did so well on a paper or a test that you didn't want to take another test, you didn't want to write another paper because you're like, no, no, it won't be as good as this one. Let's not do that again. I think I think if we believe we have to be perfect in our rhetoric and in our conversations with God, I think that's why we end up not showing up for a lot of things and we miss a lot of blessings as we go, nope, no, that's not perfected. I don't know how to fully do that, say that. I don't know how to forgive that well. Uh, and so we just stay away. Well, if you stay away from forgiveness, you don't forgive. And so I think the beauty of her in this chapter sharing so much of her personal journal and how so much of it was actually messy, she then gives herself the grace to navigate the season and not navigate it perfectly, but to navigate it, to start somewhere. And so on page 30, she makes this very bold statement. Right in the middle of the page, she starts with, once pain has been inflicted, it's impossible to remain unaffected. As I said before, the more our pain consumes us, the more it will control us. That person or people who hurt you, who hurt me, they've caused enough pain. There's been enough damage done. So what do I do with my pain? Acknowledge it. And what do I need to do with the feelings resulting from the pain? Own them as mine to control. Yes, the hurt was caused by someone else, but the resulting feelings are mine to manage. And I can't manage feelings I don't own. And I think that was the mic drop moment for me in this chapter. I think in the middle of this raw, honest, just I don't even know. I don't even know if this journaling was technically a prayer when she's just like, don't even ask me to forgive like Jesus. I don't even want to think about that being a thing right now because I don't want to do it right now. And I don't even know if it's possible. I think that is her beginning to own the fact that she doesn't own control. She can't control who hurt her. She can't control why they hurt her. She can't control whether or not they will ever apologize to her. And so the reality is she's owning that she doesn't own control over them, but she does own control of her feelings, her perception, and how she manages those things. And so she says, she has another powerhouse quote on the next page. It's highlighted. It says, if healing hasn't been worked out and forgiveness hasn't been walked out, chaos is what will continue to play out. And so in that first little phrase, if healing hasn't been worked out, like when you think about working out, like at the gym, right? You do not walk in there day one and just look like the be all end all. That is a months and months and years process, and it doesn't feel good. And I think when she talks about the healing needing to be worked out so the chaos internally can find peace, I think she's talking about, at least in my perspective, part of that working it out is having those raw, gritty, honest prayers. I mean, your first prayer ever to God, as far as, salvation, as far as asking Jesus to save you and forgive you and give you meaning, that is a raw, ugly prayer. That is you coming to him and your ugliest, like your soul's most hurt, your soul's most mistake laden. And Jesus is like, come on, that's who I want. That is who I want. I want a heart that is messy but repentant. I want a heart that is unsure but is crawling to me for answers. And I want a heart that says, yeah, I can't forgive like Jesus right now. I don't know. I don't know that I can yet, but I do know that it is still my place to manage my hurt. And I will accept that it won't be a perfect season, that I won't navigate forgiveness flawlessly. But the moment I own that I control how I respond, and the moment I notice that I will not always respond perfectly, but God does give me the grace to proceed on this journey of forgiveness, and he's not expecting perfection, that's the moment that forgiveness, I don't even know if it seems possible at the beginning, but that is the moment the chaos internally just kind of has to take a back seat. Still there. It'll still rear its head. It'll tell you you should be taking a left when you're taking a right, but it has to take a back seat and it has to mute. And I think what happens is that voice of chaos from the enemy, I think it gets quieter and quieter the more we're willing to pursue forgiveness, even when it's messy, even when you're not perfect. And just find that God works best in our mess, right? Like that's who he is. That's not only what he does, but that's where he thrives. He died for sinners. So quite literally, those who wrestle with unforgiveness, like that's his target audience. Those are the people he's cheering on to move forward, to still be aware they're going to mess up, but to at least say, hey, I own this journey. And so that's what I got out of chapter 3. If you had a chance to read it and you have thoughts, please drop them in the comments. Let's see. As a few of you hop on. Kimberly, it's so good to see you on from Eastern North Carolina. This, That, and Grace, South Carolina. Got both my Carolinas on here today. I like what you said, This, That, and Grace, when you talked about he's waiting to speak and heal those places we think are secret. I think obviously God is the judge, right? But he's also love, and there's this balance there. And I think, however, I think believers have a tough time going to the extremes, and we rarely see God as both, that God is both judge and love. And I think when we sometimes are so consumed with the idea that God is judge, we forget that he's not waiting to judge us if we're his children. He's waiting to heal us and forgive us and say, hey, no, here's a better way out of this. Here's a better way to handle this. Here's peace. Here's forgiveness. Here's my love. So this, that, and grace. It's a very good point. Lysa, there are days when I've literally just prayed help. Like I don't. I think in our humanity, sometimes we are grieving so deeply or we are hurting so much, we don't have the cognitive ability to form words. We don't even know sometimes we know we're hurt, but we don't know what healing even looks like. And so sometimes help is as good as the prayer gets. And I'm here to tell you those prayers work. God is not limited by my prayer life and how many words do or don't fit on the page to heal me and forgive me and work on me. And Jim, I'm not going to lie, that's such a good point. Jim says it's really hard to find self-forgiveness even while knowing Christ's forgiveness is there. Yeah. No, I think that's so true. And I'll tell you, I think I'm a diehard perfectionist. I have clinical obsessive compulsive disorder. So I obsess over the art of perfection and being perfect. And so I struggle with hey, God's forgiven you, you can forgive yourself now. And I'll tell you why I think we struggle with that. I'm sure there's multiple reasons, but I have come to the conclusion that the enemy knows if you finally accept forgiveness, you are a weapon of God to be reckoned with. Because the second that you forgive yourself, you forgive other people more easily. And the second other people see you forgiving things that you can't forget, forgiving hard things, that's when people start looking at you and saying, there is something about that person that lets them do things that are not people-ish. There is something not human about that person. And eventually those people will come up and ask you, and you get to tell them, it's Jesus, it's not me. That is how I'm able to forgive so well. So Jim, I encourage you. I want you to know I'm in the same boat. I am rowing upstream every day as far as forgiving myself. But I encourage you to remember that as so the enemy not wanting you to forgive yourself, because the moment you forgive yourself, you get to forgive other people and you literally get to be that beacon of light. So I encourage you and I challenge you in that as well. Maggie, that's such a cute name. Maggie Smith from Ontario, Canada. The name of the Lord is a strong tower. I think that's in Psalms. Such a beautiful, beautiful passage. And I so agree with that. I think if you think about a tower, a lot of times we just think about this big, strong building, which is obviously a tower. But what I think of in a tower is I think of the top of it, the watchtower part of it. And that's kind of how I see Jesus. I think he has the 360-degree view. He sees all things. He knows what's coming and going before it's coming and going. And he is our protection. And he doesn't just protect us physically, though that's more than enough reason to praise him. He protects our souls when we're in the middle of a season of defiance and rebellion. He protects us in the middle of seasons when we don't want to forgive. He's just I just see him sitting there, just almost like putting our little souls in a pack and play, like you do a baby, like, I'll let you roll around in here, throw a few toys, but I've got you in my boundaries. You're safe here. I'm going to let you tumble through some stuff. I'm going to let you wrestle with forgiveness, but I'm not going to let you out of my sight because I love you and I want to protect you and I'm going to protect you. So guys, chapter 3 was great. It's been my favorite so far out of the first 3. Don't forget, if you haven't had a chance to get a copy, we are going through Lysa Terkeurst's Forgiving What You Can't Forget. Chapter 3 was so good. I started reading chapter 4 and it's awesome. It's very deep, very vulnerable, but very, very good. Don't forget, if you want to get updates on anytime we're doing IB Book Club stuff, please click the subscribe button. I'll drop it in the information section below. But if you have questions or topics and you don't feel like blasting them to the whole YouTube world, I will put my Instagram name at the bottom if you want to reach out to me about book ideas or themes. So feel free to find me there if you're just not comfortable going here in the live chat. But I'm blessed by you guys. I hope y'all have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you guys soon. And as Lysa says, we're going to end on Lysa's note. We're going to step out to this weekend in the name of Jesus. So I will see you next week. Reach out if you need anything.